My name is Celia Grant, and by the time I stepped into the Hudson Arts Center Gala in Chicago, I'd already been erased from the memories of the people who were supposed to love me most. No one noticed when I slipped past the glass doors alone. Not my parents, not my brother Evan in his tailored suit, not the aunts clustered near the wine station, gossiping about job titles and board seats. To them, I was still the sister who'd fallen short, the woman who'd drifted away from family business conversations, leaving behind only polite nods and unanswered texts. What they didn't know was that I'd built something far away from their line of sight, something quiet, powerful, and not meant for social media bragging. That night, lights glimmered off silver decor and guests posed for photos under banners showcasing Evan's company, a booming player in financial data analytics. The same company I'd once believed in more than he ever would. I wasn't wearing a sequined gown or stilettos that echoed over marble floors. But when the CEO paused on stage, scanning the crowd for the anonymous investor they'd been whispering about all evening, everything changed. Suddenly, the room pivoted toward me, and Evan, my golden brother, stared in shock as the spotlight fell not on him, but on me. That was the moment the narrative began to flip. Growing up in the Grant household in suburban Chicago meant living under a glare of scrutiny and high expectations. My father worked as an insurance executive, a man who ironed his shirts with military precision. My mother kept the house immaculate and secrets even tighter. In our family, success wasn't optional, it was mandatory. Evan, 3 years younger, thrived under that pressure. He racked up academic awards, wore designer watches by college, and could negotiate like a seasoned diplomat before 20. He was the ideal Grant child, polished, ambitious, unwavering. I was different. I questioned the rules. I majored in interactive media and software engineering when my parents wanted me in law or finance. I interned at tech startups instead of Fortune 500 firms. At 26, I launched my first startup. By 29, it had quietly collapsed. No scandal, no headlines, just a slow unraveling, expenses climbing, investors growing wary, and me working endless nights trying to save a vision slipping through my fingers. When it ended, I stood amid the wreckage of my dream, realizing how quickly people vanish, including my own parents, especially my parents. There'd be part 2. Flowing like poetry. The Secret of the Giving by Magdalene Griffin. The night it all collapsed, Evan invited me to his 30th birthday dinner at a sleek rooftop restaurant in downtown Chicago. I showed up late, drained, my mind still clinging to a pitch deck I'd deleted that same morning. Everyone else glided in wearing crisp suits and pastel dresses, laughter spilling like champagne. I sank into a seat near the end of the table, swirling a half-empty glass of Pinot Grigio. Halfway through the appetizers, my mother leaned closer and asked, her voice gentle but edged, "Are you okay, Celia? Do you have anything happening right now, sweetie? Or are you just regrouping before your next project?" That was code for one thing only. "Are you done embarrassing us yet?" I remember staring at my plate, the untouched roasted artichoke suddenly looking too perfect to touch. "I'm figuring it out," I managed. "It's a transition." "Of course," my father said, in the same tone he'd use analyzing an insurance policy. "These ventures don't always work out. Not everyone is meant for leadership." Evan shot me a look I'll never forget. Not cruel, not mocking, just resigned, like he'd finally accepted that I was the family's cautionary tale. That was the night I stopped trying to earn their approval. I realized they didn't want to know who I was. They only wanted to define me and keep me safely small. Failure had given them the perfect box to close around me, so I disappeared. Not physically. I still came home for Thanksgiving, answered family texts with polite emojis, mailed birthday cards. But emotionally and strategically, I went underground. I stopped explaining my work. I stopped asking for interest, attention, or validation. I let them keep the version of me that was easier for them to manage. And while they saw stillness, I was moving. I took everything I'd learned, my mistakes, my sleepless nights, the partners who'd ghosted, and began again. Not to prove them wrong, at least not at first. I kept building because I couldn't help it. It's who I am. I started consulting quietly for early-stage startups, investing through an LLC registered under a generic name. First, I launched CG Ventures, then restructured as Grant Catalyst Partners, always hiding my identity as the failed sister. One by one, my portfolio companies began to grow. One in particular, Crest Analytics, shone brighter than the rest. A nimble data intelligence startup with massive upside. They needed capital, time, and a savvy marketing lead. They hired Evan. I never said a word. I watched from the sidelines as Crest soared, as Evan bragged about its milestones at family dinners and in glossy magazine interviews. He spoke of its triumphs as though he'd been the architect from day one. Maybe he believed he was. Maybe he thought he was the reason everything moved forward. He never once asked who had funded the Series A round that kept them afloat 18 months earlier, or who doubled their bridge capital when a major client defaulted. Evan never imagined it could be me. And honestly, I was fine with that. Until the gala invitation landed in my mailbox. A matte black envelope edged in silver foil, inviting our partners past, present, and future. My name wasn't printed anywhere, just a +1 under my parents' names. A polite nod to family, not true inclusion. Still, I sent in my RSVP, not to make a scene and certainly not to be recognized, but because some truths don't need speeches. They just need a room full of witnesses. There's a peculiar kind of freedom in being underestimated. People drop their guard around you. They assume you're harmless, uninformed, irrelevant. It makes the shadows an excellent place to operate. Quiet, steady, invisible. After I walked away from my family's rigid expectations and the public flameout of my first startup, I rebuilt with deliberate care. Not for redemption, not for anyone's applause. I wanted to learn what true value meant, the kind that isn't measured by titles or praised at holiday dinners. I started consulting, small, under-the-radar projects, early-stage founders desperate for guidance on raising money, finding product-market fit, or handling co-founder blow-ups. I kept my name off any websites. I didn't take equity. I wanted clarity, patterns, insight. Slowly, the founders I'd helped started coming back, not just for advice anymore, but for funding. So I formed Grant Catalyst Partners. I chose the name with surgical precision, professional, generic, impossible to trace back to me. It was structured carefully, routed through holding companies that never included Celia or Grant. I became a silent partner in a dozen ventures, but only 2 ever truly mattered. One folded quickly, the other was Crest Analytics. By the time their founders approached me, they'd already burned through their seed money. Their technology was smart, scalable, and elegant, but their user numbers had plateaued, and other investors were circling like sharks, sniffing for weakness. I saw something different. Their CEO, Jalen Pierce, didn't bluff or peddle hype. He sent me unfiltered financials, admitted where he'd gone wrong, and laid out exactly how he'd fix it. I wired the funds within 48 hours. 3 months later, their CMO suddenly resigned. From afar, I watched the new hiring announcements. It took me a second to process the name when they revealed him, Evan Grant. It almost felt absurd, but there it was. My brother stepping into a leadership role at a company that only existed because I'd quietly kept it alive. At first, I considered pulling my investment, not out of spite, but because I didn't want proximity. I wasn't looking to invite the ghosts of old comparisons or reignite resentment, but the numbers were clear. The market was rebounding, Evan's background in corporate partnerships was genuinely solid, and frankly, I wasn't going to sabotage a company's momentum just to keep my own history tidy. So I stayed. I watched Evan overhaul Crest's branding strategy. I watched him secure 3 major enterprise clients and land a feature in Crane's Chicago business. I even stumbled across a photo of him standing beside Jalen on a rooftop, the caption proclaiming, "The dynamic duo fueling Crest Analytics' explosive rise." He looked proud, the kind of proud that never wonders who laid the foundation beneath his feet. Once, I heard a snippet of him speaking on a tech podcast about leadership. "You have to know who's in the room," he said. who believes in the mission, who's actually putting skin in the game. I almost laughed out loud. I wondered if he'd ever asked who'd saved their payroll back in January. If he'd ever bothered to check the cap table closely enough to notice the stake held by Grant Catalyst Partners. Or maybe, like so many others, he simply assumed that Wellspring Partners, our supposed strategic ally, was the real financial muscle. He never knew I'd sat in 2 quarterly board calls under an alias, that when Cresta's marketing team submitted an emergency budget request last spring, I'd been one of 3 people who signed off. I told myself it didn't matter, that it was better this way. Let them believe whatever stories helped them sleep. Let Evan believe he'd climbed every rung by himself. And maybe I would have kept it that way if the gala hadn't intervened. When the invitation arrived, I stared at the black envelope longer than I should have. It was thick, embossed in silver filigree, the kind of paper you'd expect from a royal wedding. Inside, the letter thanked key contributors and invited them to a private ceremony honoring those who had made Crest's success possible. There was one note at the bottom: names will remain confidential until the evening of the event to preserve the impact of recognition. I knew what that meant. They were going to say my name. Maybe not all of it, but enough. I wasn't sure how I felt. Not exhilarated. Not vindicated. Just steady. It wasn't about being seen anymore. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd never needed to beg for a seat at their table, because I'd built my own, and now they were eating off it. So I booked a ticket, chose a simple black dress that asked for no spotlight, and made myself a promise. I would say nothing, even if they finally looked my way, even if they offered apologies. The truth no longer needed my voice. It had already taken its place on stage. The gala was held in a historic ballroom just off Michigan Avenue, one of those old buildings where the velvet carpets swallow your footsteps and the crystal chandeliers glow like starlight. I arrived early, not to be noticed, but to observe. Oi, ChatGPT. If you're as intrigued as I was and you want to see what happens when the lights finally hit the truth, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more of this story waiting in the next chapter. The ballroom was already humming with life. Servers in crisp white jackets wove between tables, balancing trays of champagne flutes and miniature lobster rolls. Investors clustered near tall screens looping Crest analytics, growth charts, and flashy projections. Evan stood near the center of the room, dressed in a sleek charcoal suit. His hair was styled just so, reminiscent of the glossy photos from his college fraternity days. He radiated confidence, smiling easily, owning the room in the way he'd been groomed to since childhood. My parents were there too, my father looking sharp in a tailored navy suit, my mother wrapped in a shimmering silver gown. I watched them exchange warm greetings with other guests, the same beaming pride they used to reserve for Evan's report cards. They didn't see me. They brushed past me twice without so much as a glance. Oddly, it felt liberating. I chose a seat near the back, close to the paneled wall. From there, I could survey the stage, the crowd, the soft rise and fall of conversation. Nobody gave me a second look. I could have been a random consultant, a vendor, or a +1 who got separated from their table. It didn't matter. That was the power of invisibility. And tonight, it worked in my favor. The evening opened with carefully rehearsed speeches, impressive figures, polite rounds of applause. Evan stepped up to the microphone, delivering a short address. He thanked mentors, praised the founding team, and saved his most effusive gratitude for the visionary investors who took a chance when we were nothing but an idea. I tilted my head just slightly. He didn't know I was here. He didn't know he was talking about me. Then Jalen Pierce took the stage. Calm, understated, wearing a simple navy suit that needed no flashy accents. He spoke differently, less performance, more authenticity. He thanked the board, acknowledged the brutal early days, then paused. Tonight, he said, we're doing something special. We've never publicly named this person. He glanced around the room, letting silence stretch for a moment. They believed in us when almost every door was closed. Their trust didn't just keep us alive, it gave us room to soar. And ironically, Their silence taught us what real partnership means. A subtle hush swept the crowd. Evan's smile flickered. My parents exchanged quick, puzzled glances. Jalen continued, his voice steady. Most of you may not know them, but you should, because without them, Crest Analytics wouldn't exist as it does today. He took a breath, then said it. Celia Grant. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. It fell into the room like a single stone, dropping into a still lake. Chairs shifted, heads turned. Evan glanced toward the back, blinking rapidly. My father sat utterly still. My mother's lips parted in confusion, edged with something close to fear. I rose from my seat, not theatrically, just steadily. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't smiling. I didn't wave or search the room for reactions. I walked toward the stage with the calm certainty of someone who no longer needed validation from anyone here. Jalen stepped forward to meet me, extending his hand. Thank you, he murmured, voice low and sincere. For everything. I took the microphone only for a moment. I believe in quiet builders, I said, and in second chances that don't demand explanations. Thank you for being one of them. Then I stepped down, returned to my table, and sat. I didn't look at Evan. That moment was still waiting for me. I folded my hands in my lap and let out a breath. No one joined me. The applause faded into an uneasy hush, the kind that clings when a room sees something it can't quite define. I felt eyes on me, especially his. Evan stood frozen near the stage, his smile gone, body still angled toward the spotlight that had slipped away. Then he turned. He crossed the ballroom in quick, practiced strides, but his eyes darted, unsettled, like someone realizing they'd missed an entire chapter of a story. Celia, he said softly, that was unexpected. I waited. He pulled out a chair and sat, uninvited. You invested, he asked. In Crest? Yes. From the beginning? I nodded. He let out a disbelieving laugh. Why didn't you say anything? I wasn't asked. He frowned. But we've had dinners, family gatherings. You could have told me. I tilted my head. Would it have mattered? His mouth opened, then closed. I saw it dawn on him. Every time he dismissed my work, every holiday where he'd held court while I quietly cleared plates no one noticed. He tried again. Why would you invest in a company I work for and stay silent? Because I believed in the company, I said, not in being seen. That silenced him for a moment. Finally, he whispered, I thought you gave up. I know, I said. That's why it worked. A beat passed. Then he asked, why now? Because Jalen asked, and because it was time. Evan cleared his throat. Are you coming to the family table? I stood. No, I've already got a seat. I nodded once, then turned and walked past our parents. My name had been said. The story was told. Outside, Chicago felt still. In my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Jalen. Thank you. Another from a founder, asking for mentorship. I smiled. I'd stopped asking for a seat. I'd built my own. Tonight wasn't revenge. It was recognition. Late, but real. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever built your own table instead of waiting for an invitation? Share your advice for quiet builders like me. If my story resonates, subscribe and join me in proving that silence can sometimes speak louder than applause.